All right, welcome back. So in the last video, we should have run through setting up the spoke VNets. So in this video, what we're going to be doing is looking at setting up the hub resources. Now, the hub portion of the hub and spoke is pretty complicated. So my main goal is just that I don't butcher this particular section of the deployment. So I'll try to point out a few things along the way, and I might have to circle back to really explain some of these features better. But the first thing I want to show you is that I am now in my hub plan. So I've got multiple plans. I'm in the hub plan, and then I'm pointing to my hub module. So in my hub module, I'm going to create a VNet, some subnets within that VNet, so private subnet, and then one for my gateway. I'm going to set up a public IP for the network, and that's going to be for my gateway IP, and then that's going to connect to my site-to-site VPN. So these are the main resources I'm creating in this phase. Once these are deployed, hopefully successfully, then we will try to add on our VNet peering, which takes advantage of those spoke VNets that we created in the last step. So one thing I want to point out also is that I did log in with this one. I'll just go up a sec to the hub subscription. So Terraform apply. I know this one takes just a minute. So while this is applying, let's take a look at just kind of this section of my code. So like I said, I've got a main TF file. My main TF my main TF file is typically where I point to my modules that I plan on executing. I usually have a series of variables. These variables are if sometimes variables reference different things. In this particular instance, I have environment variables on my desktop that look like this: TF var underscore, and then whatever we want to call it after that. As long as it starts with the TF var, then you're able to pick that up with Terraform. So that's how I've got my subscription IDs stored locally without them being in my code. This says everything's going to build, so we'll say yes. I know these things take a while to build sometimes, so I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes and then maybe pause the video while it's trying to build out. And we'll pop in here real quick too, just to show you that there is in fact nothing really sitting in here except for my storage account and then my data platform key vault. All right, so back to this. So I think I just talked to you a little bit about the variables piece. So this is kind of where I keep my subscription IDs. Why do I need multiple subscriptions? Well, I typically also have a providers block, and my providers, I say a providers block. I should have multiple providers blocks. So I'll typically have a providers file, and this points to where I keep my Terraform file. So I'm keeping this in the backend, which is, in this case, this is a container within my storage account. And then I've kind of got my main provider. This is like my default one that I'm using. I will be working with peer networks though, which are sitting in peer subscriptions. So I have a config.peer providers block. So these are essentially the same thing as this other one. So we've got this providers block here, but now I've got peers coming in. Well, these peers are aliased. And so when I alias this, I'm also specifying the subscription. So while down in the base of the console, I subscribed as a particular to a particular subscription, in this case hub, I'm also pulling in the subscriptions of my various accounts as well, so dev, QA, and prod. So now that I've got multiple subscriptions accounted for and I've got them aliased, then I can start looking at my peer data. So we're not doing anything with this yet, but we are bringing it in to look at because we will use this in a future step. So I'm a big proponent of data blocks. So data blocks allow me to leverage or reference existing resources. So in this case, for example, if I'm looking at my dev network, I'm really looking at that network based on my aliased provider that I just showed you. I'm calling it out by name and then specifying the resource group. So this whole section of code here, it completely goes against everything that I believe in with this whole dry programming philosophy. But this is just kind of one of those rare occurrences where we're treating this as a pet, we're paying special attention to it, we're hopefully setting this up one time and then stepping away from it. So I do make exceptions sometimes for things like this. And so I think what else do I have here? I've got my regular config.datatf file, and this is just for the hub modules VNet. One thing I also want to call out here is the statefulness of Terraform. Terraform is a stateful programming language, and what that means is, what was pretty cool up here was I've got a VNet, subnets, site-to-site VPN, public IP. These things are all interrelated, and I'm not really telling Terraform which one to create first. However, in a future step, I am going to need this VNet, this particular VNet that does not currently exist. So one of the things that you can use is something called a depends on block, and so this depends on constraint or whatever. I am saying, well, hey, I want to make sure that my hub module that I'm executing right now. So if I go back down to my main file, my module.hub, I want to make sure that this thing runs first. So assuming that it runs first, then I can grab this resource that it is creating. So it's basically saying, well, hey, create that resource and then grab this thing out of it. So it's kind of like an extension of these data blocks. So right now I'm just kind of building up that network. And then once I've got all the elements of the network, so basically my 4 VNets, and then my the main thing I'm looking for here is my gateway, with the basically a VPN gateway. Then I can say, well, hey, I've got all the elements that I need. Why don't I bring in my VNet peering connections? So that's going to be kind of a next step. So what I'm going to do now is pause real quick, and then we'll start this back up once this section of my code is fully deployed. All right. I think that we are running again. So one thing I did want to show you before the code fully deploys, I wanted to step back into my Key Vault code. So one thing that I found really helpful was setting up a Key Vault that had a couple of things that I don't want to necessarily put out here in the open for you guys to see. So I create a Key Vault for that, and I've got my local prefix for that, so I'm kind of naming it. I'm pretty sure the Key Vault actually has to be a globally unique name, so just keep that in mind. So I'm passing it to my location, resource group name, whatever. The SKU name is standard. Nothing really too special there. One thing I did want to point out, though, aside from this access policy, you have to have an access policy so that you can actually use these secrets, is that I'm also creating a random password up front. And so this is for my this is my site-to-site pre-shared key. So I'm kind of creating this as like a random password. I'm overriding the special characters. And then what I'm doing is taking that password, and I am creating an actual resource out of that. And so I'm giving it a name, and then I'm passing the value that came from this password creation. I'm passing that value to my actual Key Vault. So I'm passing it to the Key Vault ID of what I literally just created up there. So this gives me a way that I can say, well, hey, like, let's store this kind of, like, let's create this in Terraform. We're going to use Terraform to store it. So I'm not really doing a whole lot of copy and paste there. I am going to call this out, though. So I am taking this and manually creating this secret. I've got, well, I should say, I am creating another secret manually, which is my on-prem public IP address. So this could be an environmental variable that I pass, but I don't, at my house, I don't own a static IP. So this is one thing that can change from time to time. That said, let's go ahead and take a quick peek at my hub resources now. So They should have built out. All right, so yeah, so you can see there's a lot more items here. So I've got a public IP address, I've got a VNet, I've got an on-prem connection, I've got an on-prem gateway, a site-to-site VPN gateway, and then these are the resources that already existed. Before we go too much further, also, let's just run over to the dashboard, go to my VNet for my dev VNet, and I want to pop in here to my peering, and we shouldn't have anything. So there's no peering right now. Let's go ahead and test setting up a peer connection now. So back to my hub plans. Where do I want to go for this? So I've got my basic plans, and I think I just dropped this into my inactive folder. So let's focus on one of these at a time. We've got dev, prod, and dev QA and prod. So I don't need a whole lot of things for this. I need to create one resource. It's an Azure Virtual Network Peering for my hub to dev, and then I also need to do it the other way around for dev to hub. And one of the things that we want to point out is the gateway piece of this. This is going to be different between the two. So for my hub to dev, there is no gateway in dev. It's just in hub. So we've got that set to false. But then for the dev to hub, we do want to use the gateway. So just something to call out there. Another thing is we're basically creating one of these in our hub network. So remember, we're logged into the hub. So this is kind of like our default one. So we're in the hub. This is our default one that goes from the hub out to the dev. This is a two-way street though. And so since we're doing this one from our dev subscription and back to our hub, we want to make sure that we are specifying our provider, which is an aliased provider. So let's just go on ahead and we're going to just bring this in, and we'll try dev real quick. Now, what's a little bit unique about this process, and I'll just clear this output, is because I'm doing all this from the hub. My hub, like while I'm logged in as myself, I can authenticate to all of these environments. So I'm not changing which subscription I'm in. Like I'm still in the hub subscription, and I'm just establishing this peering connection through this aliased provider. So this, again, this is not true CI/CD work. This is just, using code, but treating this as a pet. So just, I kind of wanted to call that out. So we'll do a Terraform apply real quick. Hopefully this works. I'll give this just a minute. And some of the other things too is, remember, we said that in this section of my code, in this folder for my plan, I have a data block that is for my hub VNet. I've got a data block for my peer VNet, which is dev. I've got a provider block for dev, so this is how it's aliased. I've got a variable for my dev subscription, which, remember, this is being really extracted from a TF var environmental variable on my local machine, so that it's not stored in my code. So it looks like it's running. We'll kind of hope for the best here. So it says it looks green, so I'm going to say yes. That's the same thing to me as a successful plan. So if this works, we are kind of right now, we're manually stepping through dev, QA, and prod. So I could potentially just pull those all three down, but I want to make sure that this code works. And again, this deviates from dry programming, but oops, I don't think there's anything I needed to save there, so we'll just delete all that. Oh, that's fine if we save it. Let's X out of that as well. All right, so this is creating right now. We can see that this is creating our virtual network peering, which is that kind of that line of sight between the two VNets that are in separate subscriptions. All right, so it looks like that created itself successfully. So if I refresh this, okay, so I'm in the dev network and I see that this is connected. I trust my code good enough, and I trust that this will work. So I'm going to go ahead and hop back over here and grab both my prod and my QA, and I'm just going to drag those in. And we'll just say Terraform apply. So remember that last one was 2 things added. So this one should be 4 adds, 4 additions. So give this just a minute. I'm trying to think what else I need to show you here. I'm probably going to pause the video or stop and take a step back to take a look at my site-to-site VPN connection. Because that one depends on my personal hardware, which might be a little bit different from the router that you have at your house or on your network at your organization. So I'll probably take a separate look at that, and I want to make sure that I'm not exposing anything that's sensitive through this tutorial also. But it looks like this is just about ready. So it's making its way. Yeah, there's the 4 resources I just told you about, so we'll just say yes. So give this just a minute. And we're pretty much doing this in real time, so this whole thing is, I mean, it helps to actually have the code ready to go. But this whole part has taken what, less than 20 minutes to run the hub and then connect to the spoke, so, or the 3 different spokes, so hopefully that's not too bad. Let's pop over here and just see if anything's actually building, because it'll tell us that it's building here while it's also kind of building at the same time in here. So if I go to my VNet for QA, let's go ahead and get the peering ready for this. So you can see that it's initiated, which is kind of cool. And so we're just waiting for that initialization to wrap up. I'm not really too concerned about some of this stuff. I don't think that the subscription ID is necessarily sensitive. Let's refresh one more time. So that's connected. Let's hop on over to the prod network. Take a look at its peerings as well. So that's connected. So I think we're good here. Yeah, so that looks good. All right, in the next video, we're going to take a look at that site-to-site VPN. So that was part of the build here. So we can actually take a look at that code, but then we'll take a look at actually connecting it to our router to make sure that it looks good. So I'm going to go back to my hub module, and I'm going to go to my VNet. So I created a simple VNet. I've got some subnets here. I think I already kind of showed you my process for this. You can hard code these if you want to, or pass them as variables. I'm passing this as a locals block and then extracting it out from there. Let's see, my site-to-site VPN. So for this one, I've got an Azure Virtual Network gateway. This is my VPN gateway. So I've got a name that I gave it, my location. I'm just kind of basing this off of the resource group. The type is it's VPN and it's route based. I'm going basic with generation 1, so I'm trying to be pretty cheap on this. IP configuration. Let's see, we've got the VNet gateway, my public IP. So this is the Azure public IP, which I believe is what I just created over here. So I'm referencing that. What else do we have? I put it in my gateway subnet. Was there anything special about that subnet? I've given it a name. I can't remember if this gateway subnet is a mandatory name or not. So that might be worth checking out. Back to the site-to-site VPN. All right, so my local network. So this is a gateway again. So this is an on-prem gateway. I've got these kind of standard resources. You'll see these a lot throughout my code as I'm using a data block and I'm bringing in the resource group name, this, whatever. So I'm just kind of passing that just so you can see what that looks like. My resource group, and I'm just kind of passing my environment. I'm looking it up by, first of all, I should say I'm authenticated I'm authenticated using my credentials. So I've already authenticated in. So this is local, but when we move to GitHub Actions, you're also going to be authenticated in a really similar fashion using the Open Identity connector. So it's going to still be passwordless authentication. So it's going to be whatever subscription you're signed into, and then I'm looking at my resource group by name, and so I'm passing the variable of my environment um, up the chain. So that's kind of how we're getting that. So anyways, I digress. The resource group and location, that's pretty standard. The address, the gateway address. This one is, I'm pulling this from the key vault. So if you remember, we said we've got that key vault with a secret, and I've got my gateway address there. So that secret is, I think I passed it a few minutes ago. And then I've got the connection itself. Again, pretty similar things. It's using the resource group and the location, doing IPsec. I'm pointing to the local network gateway and the Azure Virtual Network Gateway. So those are resources I just created here. Ike v2 is my protocol, and then my shared key. Again, this is also a secret. So both of these two items with the secrets, if you remember, these are both items that I pushed up to that key vault. So that way I can extract them back down. So again, that's about it for this video. I'm gonna go ahead and pause, and then we'll pick back up in another video to look at the actual configuration for that site-to-site VPN.